It's very difficult once you've been associated with that commoditized transactional approach to really become that trusted advisor. And what he recommends instead is that we come in from the right, that we find a way to position ourselves in our clients' minds right from the outset as someone who can create massive value or help them achieve their biggest commercial goals. And that's exactly what the process that the elite recruiters, the $1 million billers, and those who are really doing well, even in this what's been a very tight market, are doing when they are setting out their stall to position themselves as a high-value, impactful partner from the outset. For years, I did recruitment the hard way, only getting paid for about a fifth of the roles that I worked on, and winning the occasional retainer or exclusive vacancy when the conditions were right and when the client was really up against it. But over the last few years, I've helped over 1,000 recruiters confidently and consistently win the right level of commitment from their target clients, helping some of them to go on to be $1 million billers. And in today's episode, I'm going to explain exactly what you need to do in order to win more exclusive and retain business, as well as becoming seen as a long-term real provider and trusted partner to the businesses that you want to work with. I'm going to show you how you can get out of the trap of being paid for only a fraction of the work you do and really establish yourself as an elite recruiter. So if you're an ambitious recruiter, tired of being seen as nothing but a job filler, or you're a recruitment leader looking to grow your business in a tight market, this one's for you. Data from the REC shows that the average recruiter fills just 19% of the vacancies that they work. That's an incredibly inefficient way to run a business or build a desk. It's no wonder that recruiters are left with that feeling of anxiety or lack of clarity when it comes to doing business development, and that their results are always inconsistent and struggle to get kind of continual wins and continually hit their targets. Increasing fill rate is, in fact, the biggest opportunity for most recruiters right now. But it's not just fill rate. When you work on competitive roles, when you're working in a contingent setting, that typically means that you end up reducing your fees. Now, I know that a lot of recruiters will reduce their fees commonly from somewhere around 20% down to 15%, maybe even 12%. And that drop from a 20% fee to a 15% fee reduces your revenue by a quarter and can reduce your profit by as much as 2/3. Being one of many suppliers to your client also makes it very difficult to retain that business in the long term. It means that you're seen as an optional supplier. It means that you're seen as someone who they might choose to do business with or like to do business with, but certainly not somebody that is essential to their business or vital to the success of their organization. So working in a contingent way also positions you as a bit of a nice to have. You might get a call next time they're working on a vacancy, but honestly, you really might not. And how many times have we been there as recruiters where we think we've got a good relationship with the client and then we found out they've gone on to make a new hire through somebody else, maybe one of our competitors. It hurts even more when, of course, those candidates that get placed are people that you know and recognize. So all of this is a real shame, because recruiters have the opportunity and the ability, the skill set and the expertise required to address one of their clients' biggest challenges. Now, most leaders that you'll speak to will say that the people that they work with, their team, the skill sets in their team are going to be one of the biggest determinants of their success, either their greatest asset or just something that they know they absolutely need to have the best people in their team to achieve their commercial goals or exceed their commercial goals. And yet for most businesses, the way that they bring talent into their organization is not done in a way that they would recognize as being market leading or a competitive advantage for them, or even really like anything other than a bit inefficient. So as a recruiter, what we can really do for businesses is help them close in on those big commercial goals, be it grow market share or break into a new market, by helping them sort out the bottlenecks in their hiring process, better engage talent, find better quality people, and reduce the burden of doing so. You therefore have a massive amount of value that makes it completely right that you should be shooting for the highest levels of commitment and seeking for your client to give you the best quality business. The simple way, in fact, to get more commitment, higher fees, more control, better relationships, and longer retention with your clients is to ditch that transactional approach where we're focusing fully on vacancies and making placements, and instead approach them with what you can really do, the full value of what you can really do, which is helping them become a market leading employer. So how exactly do you go about doing that? How exactly can you go about getting your clients to see you as that expert with real value? That's exactly what we're going to cover today. There are two schools of thought. The classic approach, which is to get your foot in the door. That's the one where you're working hard to get an opportunity, chasing live leads, specking out candidates, looking for ways to get in front of your client in order to potentially fill the role and then potentially prove yourself and become indispensable to them in the future. Lots of recruiters take that approach. It's the kind of classic methodology. It's a tried and tested kind of formula. The problem with it is that it can be quite slow. It can be quite unpredictable. And it also relies on a significant amount of luck. Lots of recruiters tell me, they work hard and therefore they make their own luck, which I have massive amounts of empathy for. Hard work is always going to be a key part of this recipe. So why don't we look at ways to do the hard work that lead to consistent results rather than doing the hard work simply to generate lucky outcomes for ourselves? So what's the alternative? The alternative is to set out your position as an expert from the outset. We need to be thinking here about what Anthony Iannarino, the world-leading sales author and individual who built a staffing empire in the US market around healthcare, says and describes as level 4 value. Now, level 4 value says that you've got four different types of relationship with your client. You've either got something that looks very transactional, very commoditized, or on the right-hand side, you've got this idea of being a trusted partner. Approach most recruiters take is one of getting your foot in the door, winning that transactional relationship, and then, as I say, working their way up to a trusted partner over time. What Anthony says is there's no need to do that. In fact, there's no point in doing that. It's very difficult once you've been associated with that commoditized transactional approach to really become that trusted advisor. And what he recommends instead is that we come in from the right, that we find a way to position ourselves in our clients' minds right from the outset as someone who can create massive value or help them achieve their biggest commercial goals. And that's exactly what the process that the elite recruiters, the $1 million billers, and those who are really doing well, even in this what's been a very tight market, are doing. When they are setting out their stall to position themselves as a high value, impactful partner from the outset, that's when they see the ability to win retainers, exclusive roles, or long-term contracts to work with businesses on an embedded or RPO type model. That's what they're doing. They're not selling their ability to fill roles. They're selling their ability to deliver transformation to their clients of the way their clients experience hiring. There is, of course, a methodology behind it all. It's the methodology that we've codified into the Recruiter Sales Playbook, and it's the exact process that we share with the businesses we work with. And I want to give you a bit of a snapshot into that today, specifically as it pertains to how can you stop being in a position where you only get paid for 20% of the roles you work or only fill a fraction of the opportunities you work on. I don't want that for anybody. I don't want any recruiter out there to be stuck working on a contingent basis without the toolkit to sell and win business that has more commitment with it. Now, first thing we're going to need to do in order to get to that point is we're going to need to focus on the timing of your outreach. There's a whole load of information and inspiration at the moment for recruiters around marketing. How can you better define your marketing strategies? How can you use marketing tools to win business? I think that they are absolutely on point and that they deliver a huge amount of value. But if what you want is highly committed clients who work with you from before they have a vacancy, right the way through their vacancies and retain you as a continual supplier, foregoing all of your competition, then you're going to need to take proactive steps to sell your value to those organizations. And when I say sell, I don't mean pitch, persuade, or convince. Our definition here for selling is helping other people make good decisions. And if you can help your target clients make the right decision as to how to hire today and going forwards, then you're going to put yourself in a brilliant position. And when it comes to timing, we really need to think about one fundamental truth: that somebody with a live vacancy, a hiring manager with a live vacancy, is not typically going to be a very good person to sell to. In fact, I would suggest that a hiring manager with a live vacancy is the worst person to sell to. Why is that? Well, think about what a hiring manager's life is like at the point they've got a vacancy. A few things are happening. They've got a vacancy, which means they've got more work than they can deliver or execute on. They're either delegating that to the team or taking it on themselves. Either way, they've got more work and less capacity than they previously did. But they've also got this other thorny, big, difficult task of hiring. So they need to be thinking about the extra work they've got to do. They also need to be thinking about how are they going to run a process? How are they going to set time aside for interviews? How are they going to review CVs? How are they going to attract the right quality of candidate? All of those things add up to stress and pressure. One of the things that's also going to be true for them is they're going to have an overflowing inbox of candidates and CVs and the phone ringing off the hook from recruiters, if the recruiters are still using a phone, of course. So they're going to have an overflowing inbox and a phone that is ringing red hot. From their perspective, filling that role is going to be straightforward. Filling that role is not a massive problem. From their perspective, the vacancy isn't the problem. They don't have any doubts typically that they're going to be able to find somebody for this role. But what they find as they start to execute that process is that trying to hire, the method of hiring, the approach to hiring, or their hiring strategy maybe isn't as effective as it could be. Maybe it isn't effective as it should be. Maybe there are problems that they keep running into every time they hire, despite the avalanche of CVs and despite the promises from recruiters that make hiring tougher than they'd like it to be. That is the problem. And that is the conversation we need to talk to them about. But when their feet are to the fire, when they've got a real issue, a real emergency going on right now, it's very difficult for them to see the wood for the trees and really kind of take a strategic approach. They are going to be more focused on getting a candidate into that role immediately or filling that vacancy than they are thinking about their broader hiring strategy. But that's okay, because you don't want to work ideally with people who hire once or twice a year. People who hire once or twice a year take a lot of effort to cultivate the relationship and don't give a high value return. If you look at your average client value, if they hire once or twice per year, you might make 20 or 30,000 pounds out of them. If they hire 5 or 10 times per year, that could be as much as 100 or 200,000 pounds worth of fees for the same amount of kind of effort in bringing that client on board. And actually, if you make 10 or 20 hires with them, typically what we see is over the duration of those hires, the effort per hire goes down. By the 10th or 12th hire, you've got such a good candidate pool for them, you know how to sell their roles, that it actually becomes easier to make those hires. So your effort per hire, your effort per outcome comes all the way down. That is a really good place for us to be. That's exactly where we want to be in terms of our approach to winning clients. As a result, the proactive approach then means we're going to step out and we're going to try and win business between hires. We're going to step out and win business from them when they're not hiring. We're going to have conversations with them about their hiring strategy when they haven't got an emergency on their desk. And that gives us the opportunity to get them thinking more about higher level, bring their horizon up to start thinking about, look, the question that we love to ask here is, if we got you to a place where hiring worked as well as you possibly could, where people in the industry looked at you and your business and said, wow, love to hire like they do, what would need to change in your current process or in outcomes that you experience? And how would you know that that change had taken place? Now, when you ask that question, you start to point to some really key elements. You start to point to what their vision of the future is. You start to point to what the metrics and the things you need to track. You start to point to the specific changes that need to happen. And in doing that, you start to reflect that you understand their problems, that you can build an understanding of their problems. You can ask them the right questions and start to really operate as a consultant. This is where you get the platform from which to provide your expertise. Look, most recruiters don't lack the expertise, the advice that they might need to give their clients. What they lack is a platform from which their clients are going to listen to that advice. The right sales methodology and the right timing in the way you sell enables you to more quickly and readily build that platform so that people look to you for your advice. So what we're talking about here comes down to a 4-step process. This is the process that the elite recruiters that I work with, the top billers that I work with, the people who go on to bill $1 million and set up really effective teams, the ones who are really doing well, even in this tight market, are ones who use this 4-step process. This process has actually been built in combination with them. I've taken their data, we've seen their approaches, we've fine-tuned it, we've coached them, we've had the conversations and continued to develop their results. Step 1 is when you're talking to a client, when you're having those initial conversations, the first primary thing you have to understand is, do they recognize symptoms in the way they hire that mean that it doesn't go the way they'd ideally like it to? So your first question with a client has to be, look, typically when people who work with us hire, they've commonly run into problem A, problem B, or problem C in the past. Problem A might be, look, the strategy that they put in place to start with, when they get halfway through the process, they realize it isn't working. They waste time having to rebrief the role or going back and finding a different approach. Either that, or they've got an internal team. The internal team do a really good job, but there's some types of vacancies that they just aren't as well equipped to help on. Or the third thing is, they have said that they don't want to work with agencies because they have to reduce their costs. But then they find themselves stuck with really critical hires, really impactful pieces of recruitment that they need to do, critical for the business, that ultimately they can't do because without the support of agencies, they're unable to get the quality of hire, consistency of hire, or clarity over decision making that they really need. Now, when we ask that question, if the client says, yes, I recognize one of those problems, and those aren't the definitive problems, there might be others that are more pertinent to your space. But when your client says, yeah, I recognize one of those problems, we get the opportunity to explore that. So step 1 of our 5 steps is, do they have a problem you can solve? The next thing we do is step back a little bit. We then say, right, what is it that your organization is actually trying to achieve? What is it that your business or your team or yourself are trying to achieve? Because it doesn't matter how good a recruiter they believe you are. If you're the best recruiter in the market, if they believe you are the best recruiter in the market, your value to them will only ever be as high as the way they view recruitment. But if you can tie the impact that you have on them to their greatest commercial goal, then they'll see you as far more important and far more valuable. So let me give you an example. A consultant that I've been working with, coaching, he recognized that for most of his clients, the key move at the moment is to release a new product. They're tech companies, and their key thing is how quickly can they release new products. So he's talking to those businesses, those CTOs, those CIOs, the tech leaders in that space, saying, right, in order for most of our clients to achieve their biggest commercial goals, whether that's share price or revenue or whatever, the thing that they recognize they need to do most of all is get their products out more quickly. And the reason that they choose to work with us, the reason that can have such a big impact on their organization is that in achieving that goal, they know that they need less distraction from recruitment, but they also need to be able to hire quickly and with a high quality without massively overpaying. So in order to get those projects or get those products out the door as quickly as possible, they need a hiring strategy that is in tune with their business. Now, to what extent do you believe that your hiring strategy supports that goal of hiring quickly, high quality people without taking up a big burden on the team? And when he started asking that question, people were coming back to him saying, yeah, you know what, right? If you can help me get my product out the door quicker, if you can help us with this new release, if you can help us get this out to market, we'll do whatever it takes to work with you, because that's our number one goal. What he also found was that when he was marketing, over time, he built up this message, and he'd have people coming back to him saying, Jamie, I realize now I need to have a conversation with you, because every time I'm going into my board meetings with my boss, whether it is, or the board meetings with the leadership team, whether it's on a monthly basis or whatever, they're always saying, right, what are we doing? What steps can we take to make sure that we get these products out the door? What can we do to make sure we get these products into the market as quickly as possible? And then your name, Jamie, came to my mind because your messaging is always about how the way you hire can impact that metric. So understanding that key commercial goal for your clients is so key. So number one, we understood their problems. We start to talk about the problems. Did they have a problem we can solve? Then we ask this idea. Then we ask this question around commercial context. Next thing we're going to ask is, look, okay, so you say hiring isn't maybe as effective as it could be, but what impact is that having? We've got to be able to measure the impact, to understand what does it mean to them if they can't release this product? What does it mean to them if it took them 3 months longer to release this product or 1 month longer to release this product? I remember not so long ago, I was working with a consultant called Henry, and he found out that there was one particular person that he could place on a project. If that person didn't go in, if that person didn't start on time, it was going to cost the business £1 million, right? Because they were a construction business, they had a master vendor contract. Any delays to that project, they were going to incur a fine. That fine was worth £1 million. So Henry was like, look, you may not think that this hire is that important, but not having that person in place is going to cost the organization £1 million. So understanding the impact is the next piece of our puzzle. Once we've understood the impact, we're going to ask another set of questions. The next set of questions is about how do we measure this change? So it's this question around, if we were able to make this work seamlessly, how would you know? If we got this to a place where it's working perfectly, how would you measure that? Now, it's usually not going to be about how many roles you fill. It's usually not going to be simply about how quickly you fill them. Time to hire, quality of hire, cost of hire, they could be relevant metrics, but we're going to need to peel the onion on this a little bit. So it might be things like time to impact. Time to impact means how long does it take to go from recognizing the vacancy to having somebody in position and delivering autonomously or delivering the expected level of work. Another measure might be first choice candidate success. So if you've got a client who's commonly facing counter offers or candidates pulling out during the process, we might say, look, a measure for you guys for quality of hire is going to be how often are you able to hire your first choice candidate? And what are the protocols that we need to put in place in order to make that happen? So they're going to be different specific metrics that sit within your process. And that enables us to sell back to those specific points. Things like case studies around, we have helped time to impact by doing X for Y company, and this is the result that it had. When you can use case studies in your sales process that specifically talk to the metrics, that specifically talk to the impact, that specifically talk to the commercial context that your business or your client is really struggling with or contending with or trying to achieve, that gives you a really rock solid methodology for sales. So let me just recap the 5. 1, understand their commercial context. 2, address their problems with hiring. 3, understand the impact of those problems. 4, really understand the metrics with which you can measure success. And 5, share your solutions through examples and case studies. Now, we set out today on a mission to improve your fill rate. So how do we take that sales methodology and use it to improve your fill rate? When you're able to describe your client's problem better than they can, they will believe that you have the solution. What we're talking about here is this process of discovery and conversation, consulting with your client will lead them to say, this sounds fantastic. How do you operate? It's not a case of you having to pitch a retainer or pitch exclusivity. What you do is you position yourself as so valuable to your client in achieving their key commercial context, solving those problems, or moving the needle in terms of the metrics that you're going to track. You actually start the conversation, or they come to you with the question, this sounds great. What do we need to do to get your support? And because what you're offering, because this methodology is so differentiated from the way that most recruiters operate, you're absolutely finding on a consistent basis that those companies that you speak to will say, we see the value here. We're happy to pay some of the fee up front, or we recognize the value here. We're happy to commit to working with you on a long-term basis if it means we can secure your help. You've changed the power dynamic in this sales process. No longer are you looking for them to help you by letting you work their vacancy, but you are setting out your store as someone who can really transform and support their business goals. And in order to get that level of support and value from you, they will recognize that they need to commit a little bit deeper and do a little bit more for you in return. It's incredible how much this process will unlock those conversations. And if you really seriously want to shift away from filling just a fraction of the roles you work, whether it's 20, 25, 30% of the vacancies you work on, or whether you occasionally pick up exclusivity or the occasional retainer, but you seek more, you're ambitious to do more of that and want to sell more RPOs or embedded solutions. You want to be seen as an expert. You want to be seen as consultative. You want to do the Anthony Iannarino thing of coming in from the right and agreeing approved partner status or trusted partner status right from the start. Then this methodology is going to unlock that for you. And I want to finish here with a story, a specific example of somebody who's done this. Now, I worked with a recruitment business leader called Andy. And Andy told me that the big issue for his organization was they were running at something like a 10% profit margin. The organization was making 8 figures in revenue, but only 10% of that was profit. That's a real worry for him. So what he was clear on was that he needed to set about winning more exclusive and retained business from high quality contacts. So I took him through the process of the playbook. I showed him how this could play out for his organization. And we embedded it and we coached the consultants and we shared it with them. And what happened was really interesting. We laid out a 3-step sales process from prospecting into discovery into closing. And after a few weeks, consultants were coming back to us and saying, Ben, we've got to a point where our clients are asking for our help and they're willing to pay full fee and give us our full commitment, but we haven't actually got to the negotiation stage. So what was happening was even in those first meetings were being run in such a way that the client was like, I'm ready to commit. Where do I sign? And the consultant was like, well, hang on, we haven't even told you about our fee model or anything else like that yet. And businesses were saying, look, we don't really, as long as you're not crazy, like as long as your fees aren't massively more than we've ever paid before, we don't really care what you charge because we want the solution you offer. That business very quickly was able to start working on 25 to 30% fees for their perm placements. They were locking in clients not only on a single role retainer, but actually for typically 5 hires or 6 months worth of work in from an upfront agreement. This is businesses that they'd never worked with before. Andy came back to me after 12 months and we've sort of had a review and said, look, where have you got to? Initially, remember that their starting point was they had a 10% margin. So they were making 8 figures in revenue, a 10% margin. Andy said that we've actually increased our revenue by 40%. Fantastic. We increased our revenue by 40% in 12 months. He said, but that's not the thing that really excites me. He said, we've actually increased our margin to 37%. We've got our profit margin. We've increased our revenue and our profit margin simultaneously. In terms of the amount of profit and benefit that created for the organization, it was huge. It meant he was able to pay his consultants more, offer a more competitive and more attractive compensation framework. It meant that his consultants were happier and more confident in the way they were working. It meant his clients were getting a better level of service from, frankly, consultants who felt much more confident and happy in the work they were doing. And crucially, or in addition, the candidate experience went up as well because his consultants were working with repeat business. They were working with consistent clients who they had much more control over the process with so that they could give better communication to the candidates. So not only did their fill rate go up, their consultant satisfaction go up, their client retention go up, and their candidate experience went up. Of course, in taking those steps, they were able to dramatically improve their fill rate. And it all stemmed from focusing on the sales process they went through, driven around how do you optimize fill rate within your organization. Hope this has provided you with some insight and inspiration. Plenty to think about, I'm sure. Drop a comment in the show notes. Drop me an email or a DM on LinkedIn if you're interested to have a conversation about what this could mean for your organization. And I look forward to seeing you next time.